Funny how niggas can change things. Funny how change can make things. Funny how change can make things. Funny how things can make a change. Funny how things can make a change. Funny how niggas change this. Funny how niggas change this. Like nigga, 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 nigga. Funny how niggas gonna change things.
I think the combination of age and the roots coming together is responsible for the speed of the passing time. I think the combination of age and the greater coming together is responsible for the speed of the passing time. It's 6 months now, and I can tell you, truthfully, few periods in my life have passed so quickly. More on that later. So, hi, I'm Imani Mason Jordan. I am using a computer. 1 second. Yes. I am a writer, and a writer who writes to read aloud, or for the spoken voice, the speaking voice, the heard voice. And I also am an artist, a performance artist, a curator, and a lesbian. So I've been doing my practice, I guess you could say, for like 7 years, but then I grew up writing and also loving the sound of voices, of listening to voices, of hearing voices. My mother has a very thick New York accent, but it wasn't until I left home that I realized that she had a New York accent. So whenever other people were talking about my mother and they put on like an accent, I'd be like, who, what is that? What are you talking about? So this like listening, this steady listening, and this mimicking or speaking next to, speaking towards something, thinking about how to be sensical or nonsensical with the sound of the voice and the accent and all of those different things. And the timbre of the voice was always very interesting to me. I used to sit as a child and pretend to be a newsreader, which is probably how I speak like this. Okay. So yeah, that's what I said. And you can read this on the website that got you here. So today I'm just gonna, we're gonna come back to my performance treadmill and kind of get into it because I think it'd be fun. But also I'm just gonna go through a few of my different works that I've been doing recently. So you've just seen a little excerpt of that's from a like work in progress showing of this performance that we'll get into. You can also see on YouTube various excerpts of my work. There was a performance that I did at Serpentine Pavilion with the artist, the sound artist Zayn Bailey, which was really an exploration of thinking through the voice as a kind of instrument that accompanies music, but also as music, as a kind of music that is accompanied. So we often think of singers as something that kind of follows the music, but we're trying to think through language and voice and vocality and orality as a way of also thinking about how the voice can be a kind of first violin. And I think it was Abbey Lincoln that said that first. So do you know who Abbey Lincoln is? Okay, well, this is your homework. This is a performance that was me responding through the voice of my instrument, the instrument of my voice, to Ayen's sound work. And I sort of started my sound performance practice I think when I was sort of very young and a bit older, organizing, and I was very interested in protest speeches and in language that gets people to do something or feel something. And so I would listen to all these incredible civil rights activists and people who had a lot of passion in their voice, preachers. James Baldwin is a huge influence of mine. Okay, some nods. You do know who James Baldwin is. Okay, good. He's 100 years old this year, but you also know that he's not alive anymore. Okay, good, there are people there. Okay, I work mostly collaboratively with other musicians or other kind of practitioners of different kinds of arts. And one of my main collaborators, who is maybe listening on Zoom, is Felix Taylor. And we do a lot of collaborating together in which I give Felix a text which I refer to as like a score built of language that I put together, which you could also consider like my writing or my poetry, and then he builds music around it based on my speaking voice. So I already set out a framework, a rhythm, a kind of pacing for the sound world that he kind of creates around it. And so we've developed lots of performances like that, and then we kind of go back and forth, and then he's improvising with my voice, and then I improvise with what he's been improvising against, and it's very fun. Okay. Also, I'm interested in narration, but I tried, for example, I narrated, you could say, or was the voiceover for this film that I made with Rabs Lansico, another one of my long-term collaborators. And what I did was, instead of try to record the same thing over and over again and get it exactly perfect, I tried to perform the whole voiceover in the 41 minutes at the film, the length of the film. And then what happened was, if there were mistakes, that was okay. So there becomes an inherent liveness in something that is usually pre-recorded, documented, and so on and so forth. Do you understand what I mean? Oh, wow, thank you. Okay. I think that I'm interested also in words, language, in the inherent musicality, in the inherent sound, the inherent song that is in a piece of text. So I'm very sensitive to when a poem is read aloud in the wrong way. It's really disconcerting. I don't know if you've ever been to I don't know if you've ever experienced it, but when people are like, oh, really reading something very in a boring way, or in a way that negates the meaning of the language, or doesn't do anything to further the poetry. Yeah, vigorous nods. It doesn't just bore me; it irks me. And so there's something about the way that words fit next to each other that feels to me like a very important part of writing a poem. There's a sonic language, there is a score, really thinking about it not as like an allegory for a score or a metaphor, but really thinking of poetry as a score. And so we each can improvise in little ways, but we're either playing the music or we're not. Got it? Got it? The dissonance is either intentional or it isn't. I also do some movement. Here's me in a back bend, rolling around, this kind of thing. This is a play that I worked on, I directed with the artist Eben Sadipo. And that was also an interesting way of thinking about sound and the voice and the theatrical voice, and thinking about what registers, what cadences make it theatre or not, and how to project your voice or not, because you don't walk around with a mic. But in this theatre play, actually she did. So that was interesting. That was interesting, and we'll go into more of that in a bit. This is a performance I did. I have this style that I've developed where it's kind of like a performance lecture at the pulpit, but also like a protest chant, but also like really trying to get you to do something, you know, like it's not just I'm talking at you, but trying to persuade you to feel. And I can really feel it happening right now. God. Tough crowd, you guys, tough crowd. Okay. Another thing I've been doing, yes, so another thing I've been doing is like when you perform, and especially when you perform language, you tend to be being looked at, right? Either when you're singing or when you're giving a lecture like this, or when you are presenting something, the speaking voice is often something that is watched as well as listened to, but often, more often than not, watched. So in a lot of my performances, I use a GoPro to film the audience, so like what I'm looking at, and you should see yourselves now, and also a little bit of the words that I can see. So I'll show you a bit what words I'm looking at, because it's quite, it's indicative of what's going on in the interiority, which I also think is quite essential to understanding my vocal practice, orality in general, and this kind of dual speaking, reading exercise that I seem to have really tied myself to. Okay. More on that. Yeah. Okay. So what I want to do now is this is just repeated 5 times. I like repetition. So it's repeated 5 times, and it's just some artists that I'm either working with, or I'm working with the texts, or the sound of their voice reading or speaking is very important to me in my practice at the moment. And so I think it's important to recognize for myself that my practice comes out of a real deep enthusiasm and passion for poetry that is meant to be read aloud. And in the 70s and sort of late 60s, there was a lot of African-American political poets who were, 60s, 70s, who were using their voice to convey a political persuasion, and the way that they were also writing it on the page was very abstract and was very kind of, there's a lot of like concrete poetry and like, you know, shapes on the page and this kind of thing. And so I'm interested when I'm reading how the shape of the words on the page change the score. Remember I called it a score before, so are we with me? Yeah. There's also a tradition of like, in a lot of Black cultures, a tradition of call and response. Let's try it now. So when I say crick, you say crack. Crick, 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 crick. That'll come back. Okay, so my favorite person in the world in terms of writing at the moment is Dionne Brand, and I once asked her a question about her writing, and you should all, Abby Lincoln, Dionne Brand, I like repetition. Okay, so you should all look at some of the writing to try to hear the sound of the words on the page, because she does a very good job of kind of fluidly moving through rhythm and pace and rhythm and pace and rhythm and pace, and it feels very exciting to read because I can hear it in my mind. Maybe it's the neurodivergence. Does anyone else have that? Woo. Okay, also, sometimes people like Julius Eastman, for example, Julius Eastman, James Jordan, Dion Brandt, okay, would be considered avant-garde musicians, but I'm really also interested in considering him, for example, a black performance artist, because there's something of the performative in his voice, in the way, you know, he kind of ad-libs 1, 2, 3, 4, and then there's 4 pianos going on at the same time, and so he's kind of bringing in these sound worlds through the voice that allow us to experience his multiplicity of knowledges about different sounds and how he transmutes them through the way he's speaking and the way he then introduces things like 52 Niggers, which is a really incredible introduction, which conveys a lot of emotion, but is also very musical. And so the way I'm speaking and the way he's speaking and the way we speak when we're trying to convince people, or the way we speak when we're trying to warn people, or the voice of maybe something on a tannoy, or the voice that is trying to cut through all the noise in an emergency, we have all of these registers that I'm interested in as kinds of ways of using language to communicate context, space, time through music, through sound. Okay. I also think I have not done enough research about this, but there's a very interesting thing that the cadence of my language is because of my speaking English, because of my speaking British English, and having been around American English, like I didn't realize this, but I say git instead of get, and things like that. And so, so the way in which I speak is also about the languages that I speak. Is also about how do I read a poem and translate a poem from a different language and convey the meaning just through the aesthetic sound of my voice. It's a question I've got. Maybe we can get some answers. Here's me reading with somebody, and it was very, this is Farida Amadou, and she was playing all of these polyrhythms, and we were going back and forth, and I was leading, and then she was leading, and it was just a little workshop that we were doing at Enjoy Jazz Festival, but it was very fun. And the funnest thing is I think improvisation, not in the drama way. Don't love that, but in the voice way. And so you'll see that Maggie Nichols is there, and you'll see also that when I perform some things in a minute, I'll be improvising around the score that is very stuck and structured. But I can also move it around if I want, because it's my score. I'm just also thinking, you know, God, humor really has a cadence too, doesn't it? No? See? Okay. So I did say earlier that I think that it's really important for the voice to be used correctly, and I'm not saying that there's like always a wrong way or a right way, or there's like one way to use the voice, but there is something really important to me about and I'm not saying that like I'm really good, but I'm saying that I like the sound of my own voice and what I do with it. And so in this performance Treadmill, which I created, it's like my performances are generally usually like 40 minutes. That's just my sweet spot. And, you know, it's like not too long, it's not too short. Anyway, so the first 19 minutes is like a soundscape that Felix and I put together based on some of the themes of the work, which is about the kind of carceral materiality and the history of carceral materiality, with specific reference to the treadmill, which was actually developed in British prisons as a tool of punishment. And so people like Oscar Wilde, who was you know, sentenced to jail for being so gay, was like then sentenced to a number of hard hours on hours of hard labor on the treadmill. Eventually he got very unwell and died soon after he left prison. So just a reminder also that the prison is where people go to slowly get sick and die. No giggles. It's not funny. It's actually very real. Silence is also interesting. Okay, so the first 19 minutes is the soundscape, which kind of explains that and roots us in watching this sweating, moving body. And then the next 19 minutes, because I was like, let's see what happens when I push my voice whilst I'm running on the treadmill, so I can kind of exhaust not just my body, but also my voice, which is part of my instrument. And so the breath will change and my ability to speak will change. And so what we heard earlier is this beginning part,
The combination,
where I'm quite sprightly, and then we get to sort of later on with the Wi-Fi, where I'm sweatier, and also where
subtle surprises,
slight changes to the way I'm allowed to speak.
Secure.
But we've already had a bit of that. So, and this is the version of Coming Together by Frederick Rzewski. I wouldn't say you have to know who he is, but you might want to check him out. And this was with a kind of theatre performer anarchist called Steve Ben Israel, and he was very lefty, and he used his voice as a performance practice to do kind of like anarchist plays.
I think
And that's how his starts.
the combination of age, physical and emotional health and ready as lovers will contrast the ravings of lost hysterical men and can act with clarity.
So I was really interested in trying that out, you know, these stages of how far I can push myself, but instead of just doing it standing still, like, for example, this guy. Oh, no, gone back. Here we go. Woo! Love it, love it. Where did it go? I've been thinking
I think the combination of age and the greater coming together.
It's different, doesn't it? So this is like something that he's doing a lot of performing, but it's not so much landing in the voice. So there's this disconnect, I find, which was interesting to me as somebody who works with their voice. This is a version, I think it's Angela Davis actually just reading.
And a greater coming together is responsible for the speed of the passing time.
You see how each version sounds very different. The voice is actually pretty critical to the feel, the experience of watching, and yet we kind of think that it's not as big of a deal, but it's actually extremely transformative to a piece of sound.
It's 6 months.
And Angela Davis reading anything, saying anything, the cadence that captures the time and the energy of the time in which she was born, in which she rose to prominence, the people that she was around, everything that has informed now as she's getting older, the kind of effect that time and age has had on her speaking voice, but the cadence remains. And then you'll see when I repeated that thing with all of the references, that somebody I was very interested in the way they use their voice, very, very different to me, also performed this text.
The combination of age.
Okay, well, we won't be flitting through, we'll just be playing that.
And a greater coming together is responsible for the speed of the passing time. I think the combination of age and a greater coming together is responsible for the speed of the passing time. It's 6 months now, and I can tell you truthfully, few periods in my life have passed.
You see? Elaine has an incredible voice, and I encourage you to look this particular performance up because it's very unlike any other rendition. Julius Eastman also did a rendition of this piece, and it's very hard to find. So I've managed to listen to parts of it because I was late to listen to it when it was recorded and played on the radio. But yes, you try and find it. It's in some archive somewhere. But very important to recognize what's encapsulated in the voice as a kind of instrument when it's not singing. Huh? Okay, and here's one that I really, 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 really don't like.
The combination, I think. The combination of, I think, the combination of age and the greater coming together is responsible for the speed and the passing time. Doubtless, subtle surprises and sometimes even calculating, seldom employing histrionics. The inevitable direction of my life. I am deliberate, sometimes even calculating, seldom employing histrionics, except as a test of the reactions of others. I read much.
You see. So in preparing for this, when I was looking at how do I do this? I can't use a computer. This is what I've realized. Okay. I looked at the comments on on the video of the first one I showed you of the record, and here we go. And I just thought this was absolutely hysterical. This is my man in the comments. Frederick Rzewski howled these words with convicted, compassionate wrath when he performed it. More critically, a strange convention ignores Rzewski contrived no unmusical stop and start or gaping gasps for his narrator. Fr narrated with natural rhythm, just as he notates coming together narration as metrical beyond rhythm. Narrators employing this consistent, no upbeat stuttering approach a pedantic interpretation of a text printed horizontally, 100% non-rhythmically, simply beginning above down beats, just as Fr performed it with natural English meter and energy, inserting spaces only where meaning and breath requires, elongating and contracting the indigenous English rhythms, as in slow chant and popular song, employing the meter's inexorable effect as if you were carefully wading through a comrade's curious manifesto. Sounds like you went to Goldsmiths, Jesus Christ. Okay, then I was like, okay, the performance procedure for coming together, what does it look, so for instruments, voice, instruments, voice, instruments, first of all. Second, there's all this information about what the instruments should do, and in the voice, he simply says the first fragment of text, I think, should be spoken as an upbeat to the beginning. Thereafter, every fragment of text is spoken at the beginning of each measure. The speaker should try to suggest a different expressive character with each repetition of a sentence. So really, a lot of room to improvise, which he does also give the musicians, the instruments. And so I just thought it was interesting of how much information and direction is given to a speaking voice compared to the singing voice, compared to different kinds of instruments, and why that is. And maybe it is actually a performative practice rather than a sound practice, but it's so sonic. You guys are unbearable. Okay, now I'm going to show you some of my texts and read them a bit, and then I'll show you some things that I'm doing to try to gather voices that I do like, that are not mine, to do some of the similar things that I do. So what I usually do is find excerpts of things that either I've written or that other people have written, and then I weave it into like a tale that is both a sonic and a kind of conceptual story. And so it's a bit like when you kind of sample bits, and so usually if it's if I'm carrying something on or using something from a spoken piece of text, then I'll try to kind of either speak it exactly how that person spoke it to the best of my ability, or I will rearrange the words or find fragments so that I can pick up on the sound that the text will make, the shape of the sound across my, soft spot, sweet spot, 40 minutes. Yeah. Crick. Oh, that was a little bit slow. It was like, yeah, it wasn't a tight beat. So just those are my notes. Okay, so for example, with this poem, I'm like, how do I read this poem? Okay, so it's like, heads together, cozy chat, one-to-one language, parlay, stack, chop, 1-1, hey, hey, cozy. Hey, stack, revisit heads together, cozy, hey, transmute, across, to change, barter, recompense, reciprocation, to alter, at the alter the action, the process, the barter. Varnish and cut, paper on paper, heads together, cozy chat, one-to-one language, parlay, stack, chop, 1-to-1, hey, hey, cozy, accretion, erasure, extraction, recalibrate, tension, saturating, overlapping, tete-a-tete, accretion, erasure, extraction, recalibrating, tension, saturating, overlapping, tete-a-tete, unshaking, impermeable, projections, accumulation, erasure, syncretic, hey, palimpsest, undoing, reforming, often over long bodies across linked time, recalibrate, tender, I'm bad, arcane convergence, tete-a-tete, reciprocation, at the alter the action, the failure, non-occurrence, call to mind, mindful, recompense, reciprocation, remembrance, across to change, stacking, parlay, to alter, cessation of supply, gold, leaf, etching, fault, falling, irregularity, misdemeanor, parlay, one-to-one language, heads together, cozy, the process, the barter, remember, gold altar, cessation, etching, language cosmology, sign, repetition, deceive, inlaid, embedded, back, seek, repeat, no, marked, token, throw, mingle, rut, ruin, no answers, two figures, one-to-one, tete-a-tete, inlaid, embedded, back, seek, repeat, no, recompense, reciprocation, to alter, at the alter the action, the process, the barter. So different lines have different sounds, and so it becomes something that is sonically repetitive. And so when I'm changing the words, I'm also changing the sound. Yeah? I'm working on a book of slash poems, which is, a way of writing that I'm thinking about, and sometimes they're all different words, and sometimes I focus on how to open up one phrase. So you might have seen on the cover of, I think it was The Sun, sword lad, after a 14-year-old black boy was murdered in the street by a sword-wielding white man. And the headline was sword lad. Sword lad, 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 sword, sword lad, sword lad, sword lad, sword lad, sword, sword lad, sword lad, sword lad, sword lad, sword lad, lad, sword lad, sword lad, sword, sword lad, sword lad, sword lad, sword lad. And as I was performing this, at Emmeline in July, in Shoreditch, I was performing this, and then later on it goes ord lads, ord lads, ord lad, sword lad, and I said last words. I said sod's law. So this is also a way of working with language and sound to find meaning that is hidden, to make meaning through this process also. So this is another way that I approach my instrument, to find out what it can tell me, not based on a thinking, but on a feeling and on a using and thinking through my mouth. So before I do performances, I warm up like a singer would, so that I can enunciate, so that I don't lose vowels. It's very important for me, but also so that the sounds that I make are tuneful within my experience of tunefulness. Me don't matter, me don't matter me. Don't matter me don't me don't matter, me don't, me. Growth is non-linear, painful grief. We watched, we didn't watch, 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 we weren't looking, we must not have been looking. Why aren't you looking? Let's see if we can't look at this, can't look at this. I need you to face me. Why can't you face me? Where is your bottom line, your front? Where is the line? Where are you? Why aren't you looking? Why aren't you looking? You looking, we watched, we didn't watch, 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 we weren't looking, we must not have been looking. Why aren't you looking? Why aren't we looking? Let's see if we can't look at this, can't look at this. I need you to face me. Why can't you face me? Where is your bottom line, your front? Where is the line? Where are you? Why aren't you looking? Why aren't you looking? You looking at me, you looking at me, looking at me, me don't matter, me don't matter me, and so on and so forth. Okay. How much time do I have? Okay. So here are some voices that I really, really love, that I've been trying to, I guess, put together on GarageBand, lol. That's like a Sound Arts University course joke, isn't it? I don't even know how funny that is. Okay, I'm looking for a playlist entitled LCC.
The American sense of reality is dictated by what Americans are trying to avoid. And if you're trying to avoid reality, how can you face it? The American sense of reality is dictated by what Americans are trying to avoid. And if you're trying to avoid reality, how can you face it?
Anyone who walks with a wrongdoer in order to strengthen him, knowing that all the while he is a wrongdoer, has departed from Islam. The Prophet, may peace be upon him, said, assist your brother and sister Muslim, whether he or she be an oppressor or the oppressed. When asked But how shall we assist the oppressor?
Where will you
The
be?
prophet, may peace be upon him, said, assisting an oppressor is by forbidding and withholding that person from oppression.
And where will you be when they come?
The presence and threat of prison sits like an incubus over the soul of society. It doesn't create, it doesn't treat, it doesn't help. It feeds, it harms, it cripples, and yes, it kills. It is a creation of state cruelty and carnage. It is the institutionalization of meanness, plain and simple. And movements, only social movements, can pull it from the throne of skulls. Now is the time. With love, not fear. This is Mumia Abu Jamal.
And I can't tell you who the hell set things up like this, but I can tell you that from now on, my resistance, my simple and daily and nightly self-determination may very well cost you your life. I am not wrong. Wrong is not my name. My name is my own.
Today is not the day.
They will come. What?
Today is not the day. It could be, but it is not. Today is today.
I plan to blossom bloody on an afternoon, surrounded by my comrades singing terrible revenge in merciless, accelerating rhythm.
The American sense of reality is dictated by what Americans are trying to avoid.
Okay. Then I was also interested in exploring a speaking voice that turns into a singing voice. How can I employ the same thing as in a singing voice in a way that is kind of improvised, but not a totally separate discourse. I'm still exploring my mouth. Allegedly, I was on mushrooms when I did this. If I see someone and around them and air around them and where they've been. If I see someone, I see the ghost of them, the air around them and where they've been. You can actually hear that on NTS radio. Okay, and I've also been experimenting with how do I do my practice without focusing on words, but transmuting everything that I just said about the speaking voice and how important it is to sound without words, or to kind of sampling different tones and cadences in music that, shouldn't go together but maybe do. So I just was trying to put this. This is Spring Rights by Alice Coltrane. You should also know who that is. No, not you, just you. Yeah, I'm looking at you. With Guinevere by Crosby, Stills and Nash. because in my thinking, they're like out at the same time in the same moment. And so this is what you're hearing at that time, / this is what is in my headphones. And so how do I also take fragments of everything that I'm listening to convey something? Does that make sense? Okay, and then for the last thing for my last trick, I will just play probably the last.
Accept as a test.
Maybe if you turn this up. This is the end of my performance of Treadmill.
I read much, exercise, talk to guards and inmates, feeling for the inevitable direction of my life. As lovers will contrast their emotions in times of crisis, so am I dealing with my environment, any indifferent brutality, the incessant noise, the experimental chemistry of food, the ravings of lust, hysterical men. I can act with clarity and meaning. I am deliberate, sometimes even calculating, seldom employing histrionics, except as a test of the reactions of others. I read much, exercise, talk to guards and inmates, feeling for the inevitable direction of my life.
I have notes for myself.
Brutality, the incessant noise.
I got my timings wrong.
The experimental chemistry of food.
So it ends in a kind of
The ravings of lost hysterical men. I can act
up here way
with clarity and meaning.
Fair enough. I was on a treadmill for 41 minutes.
I am deliberate, sometimes even calculating, seldom employing histrionics, except as a test of the reactions of others. I read much, exercise, I talk to guards and inmates, feeling for the inevitable direction of my life. I am deliberate, sometimes even calculating.
I think maybe when you're running,
employing
it's hard to
histrionics.
employ something deeper.
Except as a test for the
I was
reactions
running quite fast.
of
But isn't that
others.
interesting? What parts of
read
your
much.
body can be accessed? What registers?
Exercise, talk to guards and inmates, feeling for the inevitable direction of my life. I read much, exercise, talk to guards and inmates, feeling for the inevitable direction of my life.
There's applause, but we don't need to play that. It's like, wow. Yeah. Okay, and actually, this is the really beautiful voice that I found the other day, and he is no longer with us.
Whatever Allah determines, you know what I'm saying, I'm satisfied with it. Whatever, you know, so I already been right there at that moment. And I, you know what I'm saying, there's nothing changed about it. You know, I'm still, like I said before, I don't believe in the system, the criminal justice system. I don't believe in it, you know what I'm saying, to that degree. But I know that it can be used for good as well. So if good come out of it for me and for my family and for all those that's been supporting me, then all praise be to Allah. There's a little supplication that the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessing be upon him, he used to say, "Oh Allah, if life is good for me, then give me life. If death is good for me, then give me death." You know what I'm saying? So that's how I feel. You know what I'm saying? I say the same supplication. So yeah, I'm at peace, of course. Whatever Allah determines, you know what I'm saying, I'm satisfied with it. Whatever, you know, so I already been right there at that moment. And I, you know what I'm saying, there's nothing changed about it. You know, I'm still, like I said before, I don't believe in the system, the criminal justice system. I don't believe in it, you know what I'm saying, to that degree. But I know that it can be used for good as well. So if good come out of it for me and for my family and for all those that's been supporting me, then all praise be to Allah.
I think that's it. Stop me before I start again. You know I love repetition.
Thank you so much, Imani. I feel very persuaded, both by your recorded and your live voice. So we've got some time for questions. Would anyone like to get the ball rolling and I can hand around the microphone? Yes.
Hi, thank you for your talk. I have a question. You were mentioning neurodivergence. And do you have any experience with masking? And then how would that, I guess the question is about finding your own voice, because I feel like it's kind of easy to try and replicate other people's voices, kind of want to sound like someone else. So what is your experience with you finding your own voice? Something that is deeply personal and not kind of trying to sound like somebody else, maybe.
Thank you. I'm actively not masking right now, to answer the question. So I think that this is something that all people with a voice continue to search for throughout their practice, all throughout their life. And finding your own voice is an experience that sometimes I have access to and sometimes I don't. Sometimes I sound like myself, sometimes I don't sound like myself. But I don't think my... I say mimicry like this, and I kind of think about mimicry as this kind of complicated thing that I both love because it teaches me a range that then becomes mine, and then I can use, and then you can hear then in my voice the ways that I am referencing, because that's what builds a voice. Right, the voices of those around you, what everybody around you sounds like, how words shape in your mouth, and so kind of philosophically speaking, I think that's a kind of everyday activity, is to say, what is it that I need to say today? Tomorrow it will be different, right? It's constantly changing, and so there's some I guess way that it ties to what is true. A true voice, and then there are complicated philosophical questions about that, right? But I think that in relation to neurodivergence and masking, sometimes when I'm in America, I just put on an American accent, because then I don't have to deal with the whole conversation of that I'm British, and then I've spent 45 minutes having a conversation about that when I'm not even, am I even British, you know, and then it gets political. So I just try to kind of use the tools that I have to get from A to B. You know, when I was under 18, I would go into clubs and say like, well, I'm on holiday here from Australia, and I've actually left my passport at home because I've got the flight tomorrow morning. And they would always let me in, because why would you be on holiday from Australia if you're like 17 years old or like 16? So yeah, so but that's kind of like, and now I have to stop doing that, right? But the actually every day I say, where's my phone? It just is, that's also neurodivergence. But I think this question of your sound is something that you can never actually catch, because you are growing and you are changing all the time. So your sound is how you are in that moment, and whether or not you are mimicking or not, because how do you know you're not mimicking? And isn't that what we're all doing? And I bring in accents so much because, and I'm aware also of the, there are some other accents than American that I really like, but I think that there is a particular moment where people are using their voice with such effusiveness and such a rich layering of cultures that I connect to personally, because my mother is from New York, my grandmother is another voice that I love dearly, and so there's something that connects me to that. I don't think that the American voice is by any means the most beautiful or the most interesting, and I do think that our attunement to it as persuasive is also inherently political. But I think it's important to recognize that masking is a strategy for survival, in a way that using my voice is also, they're one in the same. So it's a really exciting question. Thank you.
Thank you. There's a question in the chat, but it's quite a practical question. Arash has asked, where can we have access to recorded sessions? Which I think was asked when you had links in the slides.
Right.
With the passwords.
Yes. Well, I don't usually share them, but seeing as they'll be shared live now, I should probably put them somewhere or send them around. But these people probably aren't students. Okay. Well, you can access a lot of my work on YouTube, actually. A lot of those, there's only an excerpt of my treadmill performance, which I will not share publicly because I'm making another one. But yeah, but you can access a lot of my things online, and they're linked, some of them on my website. And if they aren't, thanks for the reminder.
I'll put a link to your website in the chat.
Next question. Yes. Oh, you can use that one. I'm going to just turn the lights up a bit. Go ahead.
Hi. Thank you for that. I have like two questions here.
Okay.
Hopefully not too complicated, but you kind of answered this one slightly, or maybe to me slightly.
Yeah.
Have you ever struggled to use your voice, is what I'd say? Like whether that's like, if we just like speech impediments or anything like that, because I feel like now, at least from hearing you in this conversation, has been very smooth and very articulate. So yeah, that's the first one so far.
In terms of speech impediments, no. In terms of struggling to use my voice all the time, don't you? I think we all do, otherwise we'd be saying a lot more, we'd be speaking a lot more truth, no? And so it's sometimes that I use my speaking voice as a kind of instrument, as a way to convey things that I can't speak. Poetry as a way to convey things that must be spoken, but that are several degrees away from being articulated in a conversation. I think that there are a few artists and poets that I know that do have speech impediments that have very interesting understandings of their own voice and what can be said and spoken. And I encourage you to, if you're interested, to definitely look that up, because there's a fascinating, it's a part of their voice, and so how they use that and their experience of that, is deeply impactful. And also back to the question that was just asked, creates this idea of a true voice or not, or kind of lack thereof. And so I think in terms of speech impediments, or like logistically, practically, sometimes I think it's always emotional when I can't, it's because of emotions that I can't say something, whether that be fear or shame or anger or confusion. And so more and more I've been trying to write. I mean, I'm a writer, so yeah, of course I find it hard to speak.
Thank you. And the second question I had is kind of broad, but what, like, in your opinion, what's like the best use of the voice? If that kind of makes any sense.
You mean my favorite, or?
Yeah.
I don't have one. The best use of a voice is my grandmother telling me that she loves me. Someone making you laugh. Alice Smith's rendition of I Put a Spell on You. Khalifa, right before he dies on death row, though he's innocent, we have a problem with innocence and the whole concept of it, because it creates, therefore, a guilty who does deserve to be killed on death row. But last words, first words, unspoken things, I don't think there's a best use. I think even lies can be useful. So, I think the point of my interest in the voice is that it's not just a singing or a speaking, but there's something else sonic, there's something else emotional that allows us to communicate, a primary tool of communication. It's also a very physical activity, in the sense that it's literally vibrating in your body. And so a lot of neurodivergent people also have kind of, I think it's called a stim, where they hum or sing. And I grew up in a kind of place with people that were always humming or singing, and so there's this kind of like, it is part so deeply of who we are, even if we don't use it. Remember I said silence is also important, and not just in the way John Cage talks about it. I'm sure you all know who that is. I'm not even going to go into it. But yeah, why did you ask that question? It's thrown back at you. Yeah.
I don't know. I'm also like interested in the use of voice. Like in the last few years I've been here, I've been using my voice a lot.
You have a beautiful voice.
Thank you. Thank you. I feel like when I've used my voice and presented it to other people, they've praised my voice for, my confidence, my articulation. Is kind of like just how I use it, or how it sounds. But I feel like personally, or when I'm alone, or just when I'm having conversations, I just feel sometimes even nervous. Sometimes I can't say much. I don't say much. And then even back to like my first question about like struggling to use voice, I feel like, or maybe more, I struggle to read, I'd say, sometimes. So just kind of from my own personal experiences, I guess that's why.
I think also as Black people, our voice is a marker of race, a marker of our Blackness, and we carry that just as someone might carry a marker of their migration, or a marker of our identity in some way. And I don't mean identity in terms of our sort of who we are as people, but the ways in which we experience particular oppressions. And so I'm aware of what my voice allows me and what it does not, and aware of what your voice might create before people even see you. And so there's also a kind of very interesting politics of who gets to speak, of the voices that we hear all of the time, the voices that we don't hear as much. It's not it's on purpose that I shared the voices of multiple different people, but specifically also of Black women and Black women's voices and Black lesbian voices, that I hear this particular kind of a sonic tonality, sonic way of being that is indicative of everything around it. A voice is not separated from the body, from the place, from our lives.
Wow. Thank you.
Thank
you. That was nice. Thank you.
Put your hands up, please.
Hi, thank you so much for that. It was so inspiring and amazing. Honestly, a lot of research to do after this session,
Yes.
for sure. So lots of things to check out. And thank you also for the other questions. It's a very inspiring session. My question is about the creative process when it comes to poetry, I guess, and spoken word as well. I'm very interested in that field, and I'm getting I don't want to say serious, but I really want to expand my way of working with words and speech and poetry as well. And I'm curious, do you have any interesting lenses through which you explore poetry or spoken word? I guess I'm just referring to kind of setting a situation or an inner situation for you to express or explore new ways in which you can express yourself. I'm just curious to hear your thoughts and maybe try that for myself as well and see. Yeah.
Well, it's maybe a difficult question to ask, because it's not that I have to, it's a bad idea to try to get into a particular state of mind so that you can create, because then it's whenever the mood strikes, rather than it being a practice that you show up to however you're feeling, right? And I think it's important to do that, to also experience what difference the difference makes, right? So when I'm really sad, this is what my creative process is like. When I'm really happy, when I'm with friends, when I'm very relaxed, when I'm on a deadline. We love deadlines as neurodivergent people. And so, yeah, the time blindness is helped by the deadline, and the absolute terror of not doing it really fires me up. But I can't always create in that state, because it has a particular kind of it's a particular kind of context, and what we're saying is that it's about living a full life in which creativity is something that is not just about your practice, but also about how you express yourself. And because I work with my voice, and I work with listening, listening can alter your mood greatly, and so listening to yourself, listening to others, is part of that practice for me. I also have a daily practice of writing 3 pages of stream of consciousness, and a lot of the time, or for the book of slash poems, I kind of mine or cipher sections from my stream of consciousness. I'm not really thinking about it, but then I go back with an editing eye, and things that I like the sound of. And then I change them and edit them and turn them into longer poems. So Sword Lad, Sword Lad, Sword Lad came out of just writing it down and trying to understand what it is, why it is, and whole poems, whole lines of thought, because stream of consciousness, you're not editing. And another way to kind of access that is to remember that you are your first audience. So you're just writing for you, or you're just doing something for you, and then you come back as somebody who is bringing an editing eye, someone who is thinking about how this might be held or received by an audience. But that process of experiencing something for oneself, whatever your practice is I think often forgotten and not taught, because, who am I? But I'm actually the person who it's for, and the person who will carry it, even if I write very detailed performance notes.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Hi, thank you for the talk, Imani.
You're so welcome.
I had a question about sort of, I know you said that the treadmill piece specifically has origins in kind of like the carceral origins of the treadmill.
Yeah.
But it seems like a lot also of your like public performance has a lot to do, both like your own and the work you've done with Eve Stainton. Like it has a real kind of underpinning of like endurance to it, and I guess potentially even like kind of a sense of it being quite like confronting, if not like totally confrontational when I was like for an audience. And I was wondering like how, yeah, I guess like if you could speak a little on like how much that kind of like human endurance is like a part of your work, I guess.
I think ultimately it's just a part of my life. So the work that I create, because it's connected to how I experience the world and things that I'm thinking about, it can't be, you know, probably the hardest thing I would ever a 40-second performance would be extremely difficult for me, but a 15-minute performance would be even more difficult. You see what I mean? It's like, you know, I'd probably just use humor in the 40-second, but the 15 minutes is like not quite enough to eke out everything, you know, and I can go there, but really it's what happens when you stay there beyond your capacity to even pay attention, when you come in and out of recognition, when you come in and out of confronting the ideas, my body, what is being told to you. And so the invitation rather than the confrontation, I think, the invitation is to confront your own experience, your own emotional experience of these political situations and these political contexts, and to try to stay with it. Because as Black people, as queer people, you know, my experience is always being with it, never dropping it, never having the option, apart from by dissociating. And so the invitation is to stay with this line of thought for a period of time where you move through several different emotional states. So in that way, it's a reflection of the kind of, yeah, lived experiences that I have, but also I think as an artist, I also go through that journey of looking into something or staying with something which allows multiple layers to be unraveled. Like when you meet somebody, if you meet them for 5 minutes versus if you meet them for 45 minutes, you get to know them a little bit more. And so this intimacy, the layers of intimacy that are kind of built in that time, where we are allowed to go together, is really, it's really up to the audience, which is why I would say that it's not confrontational necessarily, even whilst it invites people to confront certain things or people or ideas. I'm not interested in confrontation, even these like long speeches, civil rights activists, or these kind of long form poems where you stay with something and you follow that emotional experience in your body rather than a kind of moment, but several moments patched together, feels not so much confrontational, but a more easeful invitation to allow yourself, permit yourself to stay with something. And there are more places that you can go then in a performance. I can do one thing for 19 minutes and then the next 19 minutes are completely different. And it's not possible to, or the whole performance has this completely different feeling if you just see one of those 19 minutes, or you swap those 19 minutes round. And so I guess in the same sense, in a way of like I, as a curator, will develop an exhibition and design that exhibition and work with the artist to think about the journey that the audience takes through space. And it's the same for me, the sonic exploration, the performative exploration. What journey am I offering? And of course, your journey will be different to mine. And the things you think when I'm relentlessly reading words, you won't hear all of them. And then the next time I'll notice a different cadence or a different sentence, or I'll add something. You know, for a while at the beginning, every time I did a performance called Works Cited, I changed the works and changed therefore the narrative, but it was the same work. And so thinking about what is opened up in that space. I mean, for now, that's what's interesting to me. I don't know that it will change because of some of the things that I've said, but yeah, I think it's about what I'm trying to do, which is also just slow us down. It's in some way kind of a meditation, even though it can be uncomfortable. But meditation, I don't know if you know, can be very uncomfortable, especially if you're taking these emotional journeys into places that you don't really want to go, or that you find you really need the energy, the capacity, and the wherewithal to take yourself. But yeah, but just to kind of underline, yeah, the confrontation, I think it's also moving from, if I'm going to confront you, I'm going to give you a protest speech, and I'm going to tell you exactly what it is and where we need to be going and how we got here. But if I am making a piece of art, the thing that I think distinguishes it is that it's an invitation. Confrontation and invitation for me are two different things, and I would never like to confront people with my art. Come on, that's like reading poetry in the wrong moment. Would you like to hear some of my poems?
Only if you do it in like a typical poet voice, where it's like really monotone.
Yeah. Or like sometimes I read the ingredients or the back of a shampoo bottle in different voices. It's fun. You should do it.
I haven't mastered Australian accent in quite the way you have. So.
Huh? Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Masterful. Yeah. It got me into like 2 or 3 clubs.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I think we've just got time for one more question. Unless anyone else can just show me. Okay, otherwise this will be the last one. Thank you.
Hello, thank you for the lecture. My question's a bit convoluted, so I'm not sure if you'll get it. All the words are there, I'm trying to make sense of them. But so with your practice, I notice obviously you're always going to pay attention to like the historical, cultural context of whatever you're saying, but then also there's the beautiful rhythm to it. And I guess thinking about my practice, you know, when I create sometimes, you know, I'm just following instincts and I'm just sort of letting that lead. But then there's always that kind of other side of me that's like constantly questioning, like, you know, is it just as shallow as like, oh, this is what I like and that's where it's going to lead me? And is there something deeper to that? And I was just, obviously that process in itself is cathartic. So I was just wondering what you place more importance on when you write. Is it more, do you, I mean, it could probably be both, but do you tend to lead from a place of like, I have a thing that I want to explore, to either, you know, comment on something or to see, give you a clearer view of your emotions or something, or do you sort of lead with your kind of aesthetic of how something sounds and perhaps writing something that's completely unrelated to each other, but is purely coming from a place of, oh, this just sounds nice, all the syllables, and if you kind of get what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I always like to think that if I desire something, that's because I'm meant to explore it. You know, I've had that thought for a while. There have been situations in my life where I'm like, oh no, that was just like I was manipulated by media or whatever to want that or feel that or think that. And so I'm, you know, both I have a lot of time for, and I'm extremely cautious of my feelings, but the point is not to over-identify with them, and to play in a creative exploration. And so when I think about, you know, I have to be interested and moved and excited in order to interest, move, or excite anybody else, I think. But there is also an element of my practice which is it's deeply collaborative with the words of others, with the practices of others, with other people, with audiences, by way of being a performance artist. And so there's something for me which is about the space between, like the space between two people, is also about explaining oneself and or trying to be understood in some way, trying to express something. And so it's also that process and the sharing of ideas and the kind of witnessing of that journey conceptually, creatively, that is very exciting to me. And so it's not that one or the other is more interesting. I think it's about a context. So for example, I might have a really interesting idea but have no idea how to make it concrete or how best to stage it, and so then you know, I can't intuit whether I need this cable or that cable, or whether or not I can use a computer. I, you know, recently the performance that was just referenced is a performance with Eve Stainton in which we're doing live welding. So I recently learned how to weld, but I'm by no means on my own intuitively welding. I think it's really about the practice. As a writer and as a, you know, someone who loves improvising, intuition is absolutely central. But I also have to then edit with that intuition. I also have to kind of explore and revisit with that intuition. And sometimes I need somebody else to tell me what they see or feel, so that I'm not using my intuition, or so I'm putting that on pause to hear something else, right? But the intuition, I don't think I can let go of entirely, so maybe I've answered your question.
I think so, yeah. Thank you.
Brilliant. All right. Well, thank you so much, Imani, for this very beautiful and thought-provoking lecture and a wonderful start to the whole of the series. So please join me in thanking Imani Mason Jordan. Okay, so we're going to end the formal session there, but please don't leave yet because we've got a couple of important announcements.